I am the product of somebody's boredom. The reason that I was created was because I was something to do. I was something to fill the time. I was the lazy answer to that question for somebody else.
There's a Sufi parable about a river that reaches the edge of a desert. It's been flowing confidently for miles, carving through mountains, feeding forests. But the desert absorbs it, panics it. The river tries to force its way across as a river, but the sand just swallows it. Then a voice whispers, "You have to let the wind carry you." The river resists. "But I'll lose myself. I'll stop being a river." The voice replies, "You were never just a river. You were always water." That story used to feel like a metaphor. Then I realized, you're the river, and the desert is your adult life. And you've been trying so hard to stay you. The you that worked in college. The you that got promoted. The you everyone recognizes. That you've forgotten water can take any shape. The question isn't how to get your personality back. It's how to stop clinging to the riverbed. And I know that sounds abstract, maybe even a little mystical, but stay with me. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't mysticism, it's mechanism. It's the actual, documented, philosophically grounded explanation for why you don't feel like yourself anymore. And more importantly, it's the way back. See, here's what nobody tells you about losing your personality. You didn't lose it. That would almost be better, wouldn't it? If you could just retrace your steps, find the moment you dropped it, pick it back up. But that's not what happened. What happened is so much more insidious and so much more common that we don't even have good language for it yet. You didn't lose your personality. You replaced it systematically, intelligently, adaptively. You replaced yourself with a more acceptable version, not because you're weak, not because you're a sellout, but because you're a functional human being living in a world that needs you to be solid when you were born to be liquid. And I know you feel it. That's why you're here. You wake up and you do all the right things. You answer the emails. You show up to the meetings. You say the appropriate things at the appropriate times. You laugh when you're supposed to laugh. You're concerned when you're supposed to be concerned. And somewhere around 3 PM, you catch your reflection in your laptop screen and you think, who is that? Not in a poetic, philosophical way, in a genuinely confused way. Because the face is yours, but the life feels rented. The personality you're performing isn't a personality at all. It's a report card. It's a Yelp review. It's a LinkedIn profile come to life. And here's the part that's going to stay with you long after this video ends. You didn't lose yourself in some dramatic moment. There was no inciting incident, no betrayal, no breakdown, no before and after. It happened so slowly you didn't notice, like a river freezing, 1 degree at a time, one compromise at a time, one I'm fine at a time, until one day you woke up and realized, I've been frozen for years, and I've been calling it maturity. So this video is about that, about the slow motion transformation from a spontaneous, fluid, unpredictable person into a competent, reliable, utterly exhausted performance. And more importantly, it's about the thaw. Because here's what I've learned, both from philosophy and from lived experience. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're not even really frozen. You're just compressed, like water under pressure. And the moment you release that pressure, even a little bit, you remember, oh, I was always supposed to move. Now, before we go any further, I need to tell you what this video is and what it isn't. This isn't self-help. I'm not going to tell you to journal your way to authenticity, or find your passion, or do the thing that scares you. That advice isn't wrong, exactly. It's just incomplete. It's like telling a frozen river to flow without explaining how ice melts. What I'm going to give you instead is the mechanism, the actual philosophical, psychological architecture of how you froze. And once you see the architecture, once you understand the engineering of your own self-abandonment, you can't unsee it. And that's when everything changes. This video is built on the work of a French philosopher named Henri Bergson. You've probably never heard of him. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1927, not for writing novels, but for doing something almost no philosopher had done before. He proved that our entire understanding of time, of self, of consciousness, was built on a lie. A useful lie, but a lie nonetheless. And that lie is what's keeping you trapped. But we'll get to Bergson. First, I need you to understand the stakes, because this isn't about optimizing yourself or becoming a better version of you. This is about survival. The survival of the part of you that's still alive under all that ice. The part that sends you anxiety at 2 a.m. The part that makes you irrationally angry at minor inconveniences. The part that occasionally, when you're driving alone or taking a shower, whispers, "This isn't what I wanted." That part isn't your enemy. It's not your weakness. It's not your dysfunction. It's your deep self, and it's trying to save your life. So here's the deal. For the next hour, I'm going to walk you through 3 things. First, I'm going to show you exactly how you became someone you don't recognize, not through metaphor, but through mechanism, through stories and philosophy and psychology and examples from your own life that are going to make you uncomfortable because you'll recognize yourself in them. Second, I'm going to introduce you to the 2 selves living inside you right now, fighting a silent civil war. And I'm going to explain why the self that's winning is the one that's killing you. And third, I'm going to give you the practices, not the vague Instagram therapy practices, but the specific, actionable, uncomfortable practices that will crack the ice. That will let water be water again. And I need you to know, this is going to cost you something. Not money, not time, but comfort. Because the personality you've built, the frozen version, it works. It gets promoted. It gets invited to things. It doesn't make scenes. And when you start to thaw, when you start to let the deep self breathe again, some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to ask you what's wrong. Some people are going to leave. And that's the price. That's always the price of coming back to life. But here's what you get in return. You get to stop being a ghost in your own existence. You get to stop performing stability and start living it. You get to remember what it feels like to laugh before you've decided if it's appropriate, to cry without analyzing whether you've earned it, to want something without immediately asking if you should want it. You get your fluidity back, your spontaneity, your aliveness, not the personality you had at 20, but the capacity to keep becoming someone new, to keep surprising yourself, to keep being water instead of ice. So if you're ready, if some part of you just exhaled for the first time in years, then let's begin. Let's talk about the river and the desert and the voice that keeps whispering, "You were never just one thing. You were always supposed to change." Let me tell you a story. Not my story. Not exactly. But a story that might sound so familiar, it hurts. There's a kid. Let's call him Michael. Michael is 7 years old. And Michael is too much. He laughs at the wrong times. He cries during commercials. He asks questions that make adults go quiet and exchange looks. Why do people say they're fine when they're not? If God is everywhere, is he in the toilet? Why does Grandma look so sad when she smiles? Teachers describe him as sensitive. His parents describe him as exhausting. His classmates don't describe him at all because by second grade, Michael has learned his first crucial lesson. Some parts of you are acceptable, and some parts of you need to be hidden. So Michael starts studying. Not math or spelling, but people. He watches which version of him makes his mum relax, which version makes his teacher smile, which version gets invited to birthday parties. And slowly, carefully, Michael starts building a second self. A self that doesn't ask uncomfortable questions. A self that laughs at the right times. A self that says, "I'm fine," and means it, or at least performs meaning it well enough that people stop asking. By middle school, Michael is good at this, really good. He's figured out how to read a room in seconds, how to adjust his energy to match the vibe, how to be funny but not weird, smart but not threatening, present but not too intense. He's become a chameleon, and chameleons survive. By high school, Michael is popular. Not king of the school popular, but solid, reliable. The guy you can bring anywhere. The guy who doesn't make things awkward. College is when the performance becomes professional. Michael picks a major that makes sense. Not because he loves it, but because he's supposed to love it. He dates people who fit, not people who ignite something in him. He joins clubs that look good on resumes. He learns to talk about his 5-year plan without his voice shaking, and everyone is so proud. Look at Michael. Look how well adjusted he is. Look how together he has it. And Michael does have it together. That's the thing. He graduates with honors. He gets a good job. He moves to a city. He dates someone appropriate. He has friends he sees for brunch. He has a gym membership and a retirement account and a LinkedIn profile that makes him sound borderline impressive. On paper, Michael has won. He's done everything right. But here's what nobody talks about. Here's what Michael would never say out loud, not even to his therapist. He doesn't remember the last time he wanted something. Not the last time he got something he wanted. The last time he wanted something at all. He doesn't remember the last time he laughed and didn't immediately wonder if it was too loud. He doesn't remember the last time he cried without feeling like he was being dramatic. He doesn't remember the last time he did something that made no sense but felt right. One night, Michael is lying in bed next to someone who loves him, or at least loves the version of him they met, and she asks him something simple. "What do you want to do this weekend?" And Michael freezes, not because he doesn't have preferences, but because he can't access the part of him that does. He's been asking, "What should I want?" for so long that "what do I want?" sounds like a foreign language. So he says what he always says, "I'm easy, whatever you want." And she smiles and says, "That's what I love about you. You're so easygoing." And Michael smiles back, and inside something cracks, because Michael realizes in that moment that he's not easygoing. He's not flexible. He's not chill. He's absent. He's Awol from his own life. He's been running such a successful performance of being a person that he's forgotten how to be one. The kid who cried during commercials, who asked uncomfortable questions, who laughed at the wrong times, that kid isn't dead. He's in a basement somewhere, pounding on the walls, screaming, "I'm still here." And Michael has gotten so good at soundproofing that he doesn't hear him anymore until 3 a.m. when the performance drops and the anxiety comes. And Michael lies there thinking, "Who am I? Who the fuck am I? Now maybe your name isn't Michael. Maybe the details are different. Maybe you weren't too sensitive as a kid. Maybe you were too loud, or too quiet, or too weird, or too much in some other way. But I'm willing to bet the pattern is the same. I'm willing to bet there was a version of you that was inconvenient. That didn't fit. That made people uncomfortable. And slowly, skillfully, intelligently, you learned to hide that version, to build a more acceptable model. And it worked. That's the tragedy. It worked so well that you got everything you were supposed to want. And now you're lying in bed at 3 a.m, wondering why it feels like you're living someone else's life. And here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. This wasn't a failure on your part. This was a rational adaptation to an irrational world. You weren't weak for doing this. You were smart. You saw very clearly that the world rewards certain kinds of people and punishes others. The world rewards consistency, predictability, stability. The world rewards people who can be counted on, who fit into systems, who don't require special accommodation. The world rewards people who are solid, and you were born liquid. You were born fluid, spontaneous, unpredictable. You were born a river, and the world needed you to be a rock, so you became a rock. You solidified. You froze yourself into a shape that made sense to everyone else. And for a while, maybe for years, that felt like success. That felt like growing up. That felt like maturity. But here's what nobody tells you about freezing. Ice doesn't stop being water. It's still water, just water that can't move, water that can't flow. Water that can't adapt or change or respond to the shape of its container. Ice is water that's trapped, and eventually, trapped water does one of two things. It cracks or it kills everything around it. That's where you are right now. That's why you're watching this. Because the ice is cracking, the performance is failing. The superficial self, the one you built to survive, is starting to suffocate the deep self, the one you were born as. And your body, in its infinite wisdom, is staging a coup. It's sending you signals. Anxiety, burnout, rage at minor inconveniences, numbness, that feeling of watching your own life from behind glass. Those aren't symptoms of a disorder. They're symptoms of being a river that's been frozen for too long. They're your deep self's last-ditch attempt to break through and say, "Let me out. Please, let me out." And this is where Henri Bergson enters the story. And this is where everything you thought you knew about personality, about self, about time, about being human, gets turned inside out. Henri Bergson was born in Paris in 1859, right in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Factories were changing how people worked. Clocks were changing how people experienced time. Science was becoming the dominant way of understanding reality. And Bergson looked around at this new world and said, "Wait, something's wrong here. We're measuring everything. We're quantifying everything. We're treating time like space, like something you can divide into units and stack like bricks. But that's not how time actually works. That's not how consciousness actually works. That's not how being alive actually works." And he spent his entire career trying to show people what we'd lost, what we'd traded away in exchange for efficiency and predictability and control. He wrote books with titles like Time and Free Will and Matter and Memory and Creative Evolution. And in those books, he made an argument that was so radical, so dangerous to the way modern society operated, that he became one of the most famous intellectuals in the world. People lined up around the block to hear him lecture. His books were translated into dozens of languages. He won the Nobel Prize. And then, almost immediately after he died, the world forgot him. On purpose. Because what Bergson was saying was too threatening, too destabilizing, too incompatible with how capitalism and industrialization and modern life needed us to think. What was he saying? He was saying that you're not one person, you're two. And the person you think you are, the person you present to the world, the person who shows up on time and answers emails and makes decisions and has opinions, that person is a fiction, a useful fiction, a necessary fiction, but a fiction nonetheless. He called that person the superficial self. And underneath it, buried under layers of habit and language and social conditioning, there's another self, a self that doesn't operate on logic or efficiency or consistency, a self that flows, that changes, that responds to life in real time without calculation or rehearsal. He called that the deep self. And he said that modern life, with its clocks and schedules and measurements and expectations, was slowly killing the deep self, was freezing it, was replacing lived time with measured time, was replacing the flow of consciousness with the performance of consciousness. And here's the kicker. He said we were doing it to ourselves, willingly, gratefully, because the superficial self is so much easier to manage. It's predictable, it's explicable, it fits into language, into categories, into job descriptions, and dating profiles, and personality tests. The superficial self can be optimized. The deep self can only be lived. So let me break this down. Let me show you exactly what Bergson meant, and why it matters, and why understanding this is the first step to getting your personality back. Or more accurately, to letting your personality move again. The superficial self is the you that exists in what Bergson called spatial time, or clock time. This is time as we normally think about it, measurable, divisible, consistent. 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., 8 hours of sleep, 30 minutes for lunch. This is time as a line, with each moment distinct and separate from the one before it and the one after it. And the self that lives in spatial time, the superficial self, has to match that structure. It has to be consistent across those separated moments. You at 9 a.m. has to be recognizably the same person as you at 5 p.m. You on Monday has to be predictable enough that people know what to expect from you on Friday. And to do that, to maintain that consistency, the superficial self has to simplify you. It has to take the chaotic, contradictory, ever-changing flow of your actual lived experience and compress it into something stable, something that can be named, something that can be understood. So it creates habits, routines, patterns. It learns what works and repeats it. It learns what fails and avoids it. It becomes, over time, a very sophisticated algorithm, a set of if-then statements. If someone asks how I am, I say I'm fine. If I'm angry, I wait until I'm alone to express it. If I want something inappropriate, I ignore the wanting until it goes away. And here's the thing. The superficial self isn't evil. It's not your enemy. It's your interface with the world. It's how you get things done. It's how you hold a job and maintain relationships and navigate social situations without constant chaos. The superficial self is the reason you can function in a society with other people. It's adaptive. It's intelligent. It's necessary. The problem is when it becomes the only self. When you live so completely in spatial time, in the world of clocks and schedules and measurements, that you forget there's another kind of time entirely. Another kind of self entirely. Bergson called this other time duration, or lived time. This is time as you actually experience it, not as a series of separate moments, but as a continuous flow. Think about the last time you were completely absorbed in something. Reading a book, watching a movie, having a conversation, making something with your hands. You looked up and hours had passed and it felt like minutes. Or the opposite. You sat through a meeting that was only 30 minutes, but it felt like days. That's duration. That's live time. Time that stretches and compresses and flows according to the quality of your experience, not the ticking of a clock. And the self that lives in duration, the deep self, doesn't operate like the superficial self at all. It doesn't simplify or compress or create habits. It responds. It flows. It's spontaneous. It's the part of you that laughs before you've decided if something's funny, that cries before you've analyzed if you've earned the right to be sad, that wants something without immediately checking if wanting it makes sense. The deep self is contradictory. It's unpredictable. It changes from moment to moment because it's not trying to maintain consistency across separated moments. It's just living, responding, flowing. When you were a kid, you lived almost entirely as the deep self. You didn't have the cognitive capacity yet to build a sophisticated superficial self. You just were. You wanted what you wanted. You felt what you felt. You did what you did. And it was exhausting for the adults around you because you were unpredictable, unmanageable, too much. So they taught you, not through cruelty, usually, but through reward and punishment and gentle correction. They taught you to pause between wanting and acting. They taught you to ask, is this appropriate, before speaking. They taught you to manage your energy, your emotions, your impulses. They taught you to live in spatial time, to be consistent, to be the same person at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., to build a superficial self. And you got so good at it, so good, that the superficial self didn't feel like a performance anymore. It felt like you. It felt like your personality. And the deep self, the flowing, spontaneous, unpredictable self, got pushed further and further down, into the basement, into the unconscious, until you forgot it was even there, until 3 a.m, when the superficial self drops for a few hours and the deep self gets a chance to speak. And it says, what are we doing? This isn't what I wanted. I'm suffocating down here. And you feel it as anxiety, as dread, as that terrible question, who am I? Because here's what Bergson understood that almost no one else did. You can't kill the deep self. You can ignore it. You can starve it. You can bury it under decades of habit and routine and performance. But you can't kill it. Because the deep self isn't a part of you. It's the you underneath all the parts. It's the water underneath the ice. And water doesn't die. It just waits. And eventually, it cracks through. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, I get it. I have 2 selves. One is functional but dead. One is alive but chaotic. What am I supposed to do with that information? Do I just quit my job and become a spontaneous mess? Do I burn down my life and hope something better grows? No. God, no. That's not what this is about. Because here's the paradox that Bergson spent his whole life trying to explain. You need both selves. You can't live as pure deep self in the modern world. You'd be homeless in a week. You'd hurt everyone around you. You'd be a child. But you can't live as pure superficial self either. That's what you've been trying to do. That's what's killing you. What you need is integration. You need the superficial self to be in service to the deep self, not in control of it. You need the performance to be a tool you use when necessary, not a prison you live in constantly. You need to remember that you're water first, and ice only when the situation requires it. And when the situation no longer requires it, You need to be able to melt, to flow, to move. And that's what the rest of this video is about. That's what the practices are for. Not to destroy the superficial self, but to subordinate it, to put it back in its proper place, to remember that consistency is a strategy, not an identity, that predictability is a tool, not a prison, that you are allowed to be different people in different moments, because that's not inconsistency, that's aliveness, that's being water. But before we get to the how, we need to talk about the why. We need to talk about exactly how the modern world trains you to abandon your deep self, how it teaches you to live entirely in spatial time, how it convinces you that the superficial self is the only self worth having. Because until you see the mechanism, until you understand the engineering of your own self-abandonment, you'll keep rebuilding the prison even as you try to escape it. So let me walk you through it. Let me show you the 4 stages of how a spontaneous child becomes a hollow adult, how a river becomes ice, and why you participated in it every step of the way. Stage 1 is childhood pruning, and it happens between the ages of roughly 5 and 12. This is when you're learning to be a person among other people. And what you learn very quickly is that some parts of you are acceptable and some parts are problems. Crying in public, problem. Sitting quietly, acceptable. Asking too many questions, problem. Following instructions, acceptable. Having big emotions, problem. Being pleasant, acceptable. And here's the thing. The adults in your life aren't usually trying to hurt you. They're trying to socialize you. They're trying to teach you how to exist in a world with other people, with rules and expectations and norms. And most of those lessons are necessary. You do need to learn that you can't hit people when you're angry. You do need to learn that you can't scream in a restaurant. Those are good lessons. But somewhere in there, mixed in with the necessary lessons, are the toxic ones. The ones that teach you that your spontaneous self is a problem, that your big feelings are too much, that your weird questions are inappropriate, that the parts of you that don't fit the mold need to be hidden. And you internalize those lessons so deeply that by the time you're 10 or 11, you don't even need adults to enforce them anymore. You enforce them yourself. You develop what psychologists call an internal censor, a little voice that reviews every impulse before it reaches your mouth. That asks, "Is this okay?" before you act. That scans the room to see what's appropriate before you express yourself. And that voice, that censor, is the first draft of your superficial self. It's the beginning of the performance. And it works. Kids with good internal censors get called well-behaved. They get rewarded. They get praise. They get good grades and teacher recommendations and invitations to playdates. So you learn, this is how you succeed. This is how you become lovable. You edit yourself. You compress yourself. You become smaller and quieter and more manageable. You learn to prune away the parts that don't fit. And the parts you prune away, the parts that are too much, they don't die. They just go underground. They become the first deposits in your deep self's basement. The first prisoners in the dungeon you're building inside yourself. Stage 2 is social calibration, and it happens during adolescence, roughly ages 13 to 25. This is when the stakes get higher. Because now, it's not just about being well-behaved. It's about being liked, being attractive, being cool, or at least not being uncool. This is when you realize people are watching, people are judging, and the judgments matter. They determine your social status, your romantic prospects, your sense of belonging. So you become a scientist of yourself. You run experiments. You try on different personas to see which ones get positive responses. You study what makes people laugh, what makes them feel comfortable, what makes them want to be around you. You learn to read social cues at lightning speed. You develop a sophisticated understanding of what different groups value and how to signal that you share those values. This is when you learn to code switch, to be one version of yourself with your parents, another with your friends, another with your teachers, another with the person you're trying to impress. And you get good at it, really good. So good that you start to forget which version is the real one. So good that the question stops making sense. And here's where it gets dangerous. You start to believe that personality is something you build, not something you have. You start to think of yourself as a project, a work in progress, something that can be optimized and improved. You look at confident people, popular people, successful people, and you think, what are they doing that I'm not? How can I reverse engineer their personality and implement it in myself? So you do. You adopt their speech patterns, their body language, their interests. You laugh at things you don't find funny. You pretend to care about things you don't care about. You hide the things you actually love because they don't fit the image you're trying to project. And it works. You become more popular, more attractive, more successful. And every success reinforces the lesson. The real you is not enough. The lovable you is the one you've constructed. Your deep self, the one that loves weird things and has strange impulses and asks uncomfortable questions. That self becomes an embarrassment, a liability, something to be managed and contained. You don't hate it exactly. You just learn to keep it locked up, to only let it out when you're alone, when no one's watching, when there are no consequences. And the tragic thing is that this works so well that you forget you're doing it. The performance becomes automatic. The superficial self becomes so sophisticated, so responsive, so well calibrated that it feels natural. It feels like you. And the deep self, the one that's been locked in the basement for years now, becomes something distant, something you only hear from occasionally, in moments of stress or exhaustion or crisis. A voice you've learned to ignore. Stage 3 is professional solidification, and it happens roughly between ages 25 and 40. Though for some people, it starts earlier, and for others, it never ends. This is when your superficial self stops being a social strategy and becomes an economic one. This is when you realize, I can't just be liked. I need to be employed. I need to be promotable. I need to be professional. So you learn a new set of rules. You learn to be consistent, reliable, to show up at the same time every day and produce the same quality of work. You learn to be agreeable in meetings, even when you disagree, to be enthusiastic about projects you don't care about, to treat your job like it's your passion, even when it's just your paycheck. You learn to build a professional persona, a work self that's polished and competent and unthreatening. And again, some of this is necessary. You do need to be reliable. You do need to be professional. Those aren't bad things. But here's what happens. Your professional persona starts to leak. It stops being something you put on at 9 a.m. and take off at 5 p.m. It starts to become who you are. You start bringing that voice home. That measured, professional, always appropriate voice. You start treating your relationships like networking opportunities, your hobbies like resume builders, your free time like something that needs to be optimized. You develop what I call the LinkedIn disease, where you start seeing yourself from the outside, as a profile, as a brand, as a set of achievements and skills and endorsements, where you make decisions based not on what you want, but on what looks good, what advances the narrative, what maintains the image. And the deep self, the one that wants things for no reason, that has irrational impulses and spontaneous desires, that self becomes not just embarrassing, but dangerous. Because spontaneity is unpredictable, and unpredictability is unpromotable. Spontaneity doesn't fit into 5-year plans or quarterly reviews. It doesn't optimize. It doesn't compound. It just is. So you learn to kill it, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, systematically. You learn to check every impulse against the question, is this professional? Is this strategic? Does this advance my goals? And anything that doesn't gets filed away, gets added to the pile of things you'll do later, when you have time, when you've made it, when you can afford to be spontaneous again. Except, you never make it. There's always another promotion to chase, another credential to earn, another box to check, and spontaneity keeps getting pushed back. The deep self keeps getting told, not yet, not now, soon, wait. And it waits. It waits for years, sometimes decades, until one day it stops waiting and starts screaming. Stage 4 is the quiet crisis, and it doesn't have a fixed age because it happens whenever your deep self finally breaks through. For some people, it's 30. For others, it's 50. For some people, it never happens because they're so good at soundproofing the basement that they never hear the screaming. They live their whole lives as superficial selves, as competent performances, and they die without ever wondering if there was someone else inside them trying to get out. But if you're watching this video, that's not you. If you're watching this, you've heard the screaming. Maybe you don't recognize it as screaming. Maybe you call it anxiety, or burnout, or depression, or just a vague sense of wrongness, of living the wrong life, of being the wrong person. But it's the same thing. It's your deep self, your durational self, your fluid self trying to break through the ice. And here's what the quiet crisis feels like. You wake up one morning and you can't remember what you like. Not what you used to like, not what you think you should like, but what you actually, currently, in this moment, like. Someone asks what you want for dinner and you freeze. Not because you're indecisive, but because you've spent so long asking, what should I want? That what do I want sounds like a foreign language. Or you're sitting in a meeting and someone asks your opinion and you realize, I don't have one. I have the opinion I'm supposed to have. I have the opinion that makes me look smart or agreeable or strategic. But my actual opinion, my gut feeling, my deep self's response, I can't access it. It's buried under so many layers of calculation and performance that I don't know how to get to it anymore. Or you're lying in bed at night next to someone who loves you, or at least loves the version of you they met, and you think, do I love them? Do I even know what love feels like when it's not a choice I've made because it makes sense? When it's not a strategy or a convenience or a good fit? Do I remember what it feels like to want something that doesn't make sense? And the worst part, the truly devastating part, is that you can't even grieve properly. Because you're not mourning a person you lost. You're mourning a person you never let yourself become. You're mourning potential. You're mourning aliveness. You're mourning the version of you that might have existed if you hadn't been so good at becoming the version everyone else needed. This is what Bergson meant when he talked about the tragedy of modern life. We don't die. We just freeze. We just solidify. We just spend our whole lives performing stability when we were born to flow. And by the time we realize what we've done, We're so invested in the performance, so dependent on the rewards it brings, that the idea of stopping feels impossible. Feels like suicide. But here's the thing, it's not. It's not suicide to thaw. It's not destruction to flow again. It's not chaos to let your deep self breathe. It's just unfamiliar. It's just scary. It's just the opposite of everything you've been taught is good and right and mature. And that brings us to the question you've probably been screaming at your screen for the last 20 minutes. Okay, I get it. I'm frozen. I'm a superficial self. I've abandoned my deep self. I'm living in spatial time. I'm performing my life instead of living it. I understand the diagnosis. Now what the fuck do I do about it? And that's fair. That's where we're going next. But before we get to the practices, before we get to the specific, actionable steps, I need to tell you one more thing. One more piece of the puzzle that's going to reframe everything. You ready? Here it is. The personality you're trying to get back never existed. I know that sounds like a betrayal. Like I've spent 40 minutes explaining how you lost yourself only to tell you there was no self to lose. But stay with me, because this is the most important insight in this entire video. This is the thing that's going to set you free. When you think about getting your personality back, what you're imagining is some fixed, stable, essential you that existed at some point in the past. Maybe when you were a kid, maybe in college, maybe before the job, before the relationship, before whatever moment you've decided was when you lost yourself. And you think, if I could just get back to that version, if I could just resurrect that person, I'd be okay. I'd be me again. But Bergson says, that's not how selves work. That's spatial thinking. That's treating yourself like an object, like a thing that can exist in a fixed state. But you're not a thing. You're a process. You're not a noun. You're a verb. You're not being. You're becoming. The you at 7 was real. The you at 17 was real. The you right now is real. But they're not the same you. They're not different versions of one essential, unchanging person. They're different moments in a continuous flow. They're the river at different points along its journey. And the river at the mountain isn't better or more authentic than the river at the sea. It's just different. It's the same water, but the shape has changed because the terrain has changed. Your deep self isn't a fixed personality that you lost. It's a capacity. The capacity to keep flowing, to keep responding to the terrain, to keep changing shape based on what life brings you. Your deep self is your fluidity, your spontaneity, your ability to be different in different moments because you're not trying to maintain some consistent, performable identity across time. And here's why this matters. If you think your personality is a fixed thing you lost, then getting it back means excavating it, finding it, resurrecting it, and that's exhausting and impossible and doomed to fail because you can't go back. You can't unlive what you've lived. You can't unknow what you know. You're not the river at the mountain anymore. You're the river at the desert. And trying to force yourself back into the mountain shape is just another form of freezing. But if you understand that your personality isn't a thing but a process, then getting it back doesn't mean excavation. It means permission. Permission to keep flowing. Permission to keep changing. Permission to be different tomorrow than you are today, without calling it inconsistency or instability or failure. The goal isn't to become who you were. The goal is to remember that you're allowed to become. That's the tragedy of the superficial self. It tricks you into thinking you're supposed to be a finished product, a stable, knowable, consistent thing. And once you believe that, once you commit to that, you stop flowing, you solidify, you freeze. Not because you've lost something, but because you've stopped moving. So when I say how to get your personality back, what I really mean is how to let yourself flow again, how to melt the ice, how to remember that you're water, and water takes the shape of whatever contains it. And that's not weakness. That's the fundamental nature of being alive. Now we can talk about the practices. Now we can talk about how to actually do this. Because now you understand what we're doing. We're not excavating. We're not resurrecting. We're melting. We're creating gaps in your schedule, in your habits, in your performance, where the deep self can breathe, where duration can happen, where you can practice being unpredictable without destroying your life. And here's what I need you to understand. These practices are going to feel stupid. They're going to feel small. You're going to think, that's it? That's the solution? I'm supposed to journal my feelings and take walks and do spontaneous shit. And that's going to fix the existential hollowness I've been living with for a decade. Yes, kind of. Because the problem isn't big. It's not dramatic. You don't need a breakdown or a revelation or a complete life overhaul. You just need cracks. Small cracks in the ice. Places where the water can start moving again. And once it starts moving, even a little bit, it creates its own momentum. Water wants to flow. Your deep self wants to live. It's just been trapped for so long, it's forgotten how. So these practices are training. They're rehabilitation. They're teaching you how to be fluid again, one small act of spontaneity at a time. Practice 1. The spontaneity audit. This is where we start, because before you can create space for spontaneity, you need to see how little space you currently have. So here's what I want you to do. Open your calendar for last week. Look at it like a detective, like you're investigating a crime. How many hours were scheduled? I mean, actually, on the calendar, blocked out, committed to something specific. Work meetings, social plans, appointments, classes, whatever. Now count the unscheduled hours, not sleep. Not the time you spent scrolling your phone or watching TV because you were too tired to do anything else. I mean genuinely unscheduled, uncommitted time. Time where you could have done anything, where no one was expecting anything from you, where you had space to be spontaneous. If you're like most people, that number is close to 0. Maybe you have a few hours on the weekend. Maybe. But most of your waking life is spoken for. It's committed. It's scheduled. It's spatial time. Every hour accounted for. Every moment planned. And here's the thing. You can't be spontaneous in a fully scheduled life. Spontaneity requires space. It requires gaps. It requires moments where you don't know what you're going to do until you're doing it. The deep self doesn't make appointments. It doesn't operate on a schedule. It flows. And flow requires emptiness. So here's the practice. Block 2 hours this week and label them unscheduled. Not free time, not self-care time. Unscheduled. And during those 2 hours, you're not allowed to plan. You're not allowed to optimize. You're not allowed to use the time productively. You just have to be. And when you feel the impulse to do something, anything, you do it. Without asking if it makes sense. Without checking if it's productive. Without wondering if it's the best use of your time. Want to take a nap at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday? Do it. Want to walk to a park you've never been to? Do it. Want to text someone you haven't talked to in years? Do it. Want to sit on your floor and cry for no reason? Do it. The goal isn't to do the right thing. The goal is to practice doing things without the internal committee meeting. To practice letting your deep self make decisions. And here's what's going to happen. It's going to feel wrong. It's going to feel wasteful. Your superficial self is going to panic and say, we could be using this time to get ahead, to be productive, to optimize something. And you're going to have to tell that voice, not right now. Right now, we're practicing being water. Right now, we're remembering how to flow. Practice 2, the intuition journal. This one's subtle, but it's going to change everything. Every night for 2 weeks, before you go to bed, write down 3 answers to this question. What did I feel pulled toward today that I ignored? Not big things, not life-changing decisions, just small moments, small impulses, the things your deep self wanted that your superficial self vetoed. Examples: I wanted to leave the meeting early, but I stayed because it would look bad. I wanted to order the weird thing on the menu, but I got the safe thing. I wanted to tell my friend I was actually not okay, but I said I was fine. I wanted to cry during that movie scene, but I swallowed it. I wanted to text that person, but it felt too random. I wanted to walk home instead of taking the train, but it wasn't efficient. Write them down, all of them. Don't analyze them. Don't justify why you ignored them. Just document them. You're creating a record, a log of all the moments your deep self tried to speak, and your superficial self said no. And after 2 weeks, read through the whole list. Look for patterns. What kinds of impulses do you consistently ignore? What does your deep self want that your superficial self keeps vetoing? And here's the key. You're not looking for this so you can judge yourself. You're looking for this so you can see the architecture of your self-abandonment, so you can see exactly how and when and why you choose the performance over the flow. Week 2 of this practice, you add one more step. Pick one pull per week and obey it. One impulse per week that you act on without analysis, without justification, without checking if it makes sense. You're practicing trust. Trusting that the deep self knows something the superficial self doesn't. Trusting that spontaneity isn't chaos, it's information. Practice 3, the not fine experiment. This one's scary. This one's going to make you want to stop. But it's also the most powerful. For 1 week, every time someone asks, "How are you?" tell the truth in one extra sentence. Not trauma dumping. Not oversharing. Just one sentence of honesty beyond the automatic. I'm fine. Examples: I'm fine, but I've been weirdly anxious this week and I don't know why. I'm okay, but honestly, I'm pretty exhausted. I'm good, though I've been thinking a lot about how I never finish things I start and it's bothering me. I'm fine, but I had a really uncomfortable conversation yesterday and I can't stop replaying it. That's it. One sentence. And then see what happens. Because here's what's going to happen. Most people will be uncomfortable. They asked, "How are you?" as a greeting, not as a question. They don't actually want to know. They want you to say fine so they can move on. And when you don't, when you give them one sentence of actual honesty, they won't know what to do with it. They'll get awkward. They'll change the subject. They'll give you advice you didn't ask for. And that's data. That's important information. It shows you how much of your relationships are built on your performance of being fine, how much other people depend on your superficial self, how uncomfortable your authenticity makes them. But here's the other thing that's going to happen. A few people will lean in. A few people will ask a follow-up question, will share their own truth, will say, "Oh my God, me too." And those people, those are your people. Those are the ones who can handle your deep self, who don't need you to be ice, who are okay with you being water. This practice teaches you two things. One, how often you lie about being okay. And two, who in your life can handle you not being okay. Both pieces of information are going to be devastating, and both are necessary. Practice 4, the nostalgia excavation. This one's gentler. This one's about remembering. Go back to your childhood, your adolescence, before you learned to be appropriate. What did you do when no one was watching? What did you do that adults called a waste of time? What did you love that you learned to be embarrassed about? Did you draw, build things, make up stories, collect rocks, stare at clouds, dance in your room, sing in the shower, play elaborate pretend games, write bad poetry, take things apart to see how they worked, spend hours arranging your stuffed animals, create complex fantasy worlds? Whatever it was, pick one thing, one activity that your child self loved before you learned to be productive, and do it for 20 minutes this week. Not to be good at it, not to make it a hobby, not to post it on Instagram, just to touch that version of you again, just to prove to the deep self that you didn't forget, that you're still here, that you're coming back. Here's why this works. Your deep self isn't gone. It's dormant. And doing something your 12-year-old self loved is like throwing a rope down the well. It's saying, I remember you. I'm sorry I left you down there. I'm trying to bring you back up. And your deep self will respond. Maybe not immediately, maybe not dramatically, but you'll feel something. A little flicker, a little pulse of aliveness, a moment where you're not performing, where you're just being. And that moment, that flicker, that's the crack in the ice. That's where the water starts moving again. Practice 5, the no explanation rule. This is the advanced practice. This is where you stop managing other people's perceptions. For 1 week, when you do something spontaneous, something off-brand, something that doesn't fit the image people have of you, don't explain it. Don't justify it. Don't contextualize it. Just do it and let it stand. Someone asks why you took a pottery class. I wanted to. Why'd you cancel plans? Needed to. Why'd you cut your hair? Felt right. Why are you reading that weird book? Interested in it. No elaboration, no story, no justification. Just the act. And then silence. This is going to feel brutal. Because silence after a choice feels dangerous. It feels like you're not controlling the narrative. Like people are going to form their own interpretations, and those interpretations might be wrong. They might think you're being weird. They might think you're going through something. They might think you're changing. And you won't be there to manage what they think. But that's the point. The deep self doesn't explain itself. It doesn't justify. It doesn't perform coherence for an audience. It just is. And every time you resist the urge to explain, every time you let an action stand without justification, you're practicing being instead of performing. You're practicing flow instead of freeze. And here's what you'll learn. Most people don't actually care as much as you think they do. Most people will just accept your unexplained choices and move on. Because they're too busy managing their own performances to analyze yours. The only person who needs you to maintain narrative coherence is your superficial self. The only person who needs you to explain every deviation is the part of you that's terrified of being unpredictable. Practice 6, the chaos day. This is the final practice. This is the one you do after you've done all the others. After you've practiced small spontaneities. After you've learned to hear the deep self. After you've started telling the truth. After you've touched your younger self. after you've stopped explaining yourself. Once you've done all that, then you're ready for this. Once a month, have a chaos day. A day with no plans, no goals, no agenda, no optimization. You wake up and you ask, what does today want to be? And then you let it be that. You follow impulses. You make decisions in real time. You let the day unfold without trying to control it. Want to stay in bed till noon? Do it. Want to drive somewhere you've never been? Do it. Want to spend 4 hours in a bookstore reading books you'll never buy? Do it. Want to text 5 people you haven't talked to in years? Do it. Want to sit in a park and cry? Do it. Want to make something with your hands? Do it. The only rule is no pre-planning, no justifying, no checking if it's productive or smart or efficient. This is going to feel terrifying because you'll confront how much of your life is routine masquerading as choice, how little you trust yourself to make spontaneous decisions, how dependent you are on structure and schedule and plan. But it's also going to feel exhilarating because by the end of the day, you'll remember, I'm not a machine. I'm not an algorithm. I'm a living thing. And living things are allowed to be unpredictable. Living things are allowed to flow. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's it? 6 practices. I do these 6 things and I get my personality back. I become my deep self again. I thaw? No. Yes. Kind of. Here's the truth. These practices don't give you your personality back. They create conditions where your personality can move again. They're not the solution. They're the gap in the ice, the crack, the space where water remembers it can flow. Because here's what I haven't told you yet. Here's the part that no one warns you about when you start this work. Getting your personality back, letting your deep self breathe, learning to flow again. It has a cost. And the cost is this. Some people will hate it. Some people will ask what's wrong with you. Some people will try to pull you back. And some people will leave. Not because they're bad people. Not because they don't love you. But because they loved the frozen you. They depended on the predictable you. The you who didn't have needs or moods or inconvenient truths. The you who was easy, who was stable, who didn't threaten their own performances by being authentic. And when you start to thaw, when you start to be unpredictable, when you start saying, I don't know, and I changed my mind, and actually, I don't want to, those people are going to panic. They're going to say, you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment. They'll mean you've broken the contract, the unspoken agreement that you would stay frozen so they could stay frozen too. And this is the loneliest part of the thaw, because you're losing people, not bad people, not toxic people, just people who can't handle your fluidity, people who need you to be ice, and the people who can handle your fluidity, who love your deep self, who are okay with you being water. You haven't met most of them yet. So there's this gap, this terrifying gap where you're losing the old relationships, but the new ones haven't formed yet, where you're neither the old you nor the new you, where you're just in between, just thawing, just flowing, just alone. And this is where most people stop. This is where they refreeze. Because the loneliness feels like proof that they made a mistake, that the superficial self was right, that stability is worth more than aliveness, that it's better to be ice with company than water alone. But here's what Bergson would say. Here's what I'm saying. The river doesn't apologize for flowing. It doesn't stay frozen to keep the townspeople comfortable. It just flows. And the fish that can't swim in the new current, They find a different river, and new fish come. Fish that were looking for flow. Fish that couldn't survive in ice. The people who leave when you thaw. They're not your people. They never were. They were ice people. They needed you frozen. And the people who stay, who lean in, who get excited when you're unpredictable, who love you more when you're honest, those are water people. Those are your people. And you'll find more of them. I promise you'll find more of them. But you have to be willing to be alone first. You have to be willing to flow without an audience. To be water without applause. To trust that aliveness is worth the loneliness. That movement is worth the loss. And I'm not going to lie to you. It is lonely. It is hard. There are going to be nights when you think I was happier frozen. At least I had people. At least I fit. At least I knew who I was supposed to be. But then you're going to have moments. Small moments. Where you laugh without analyzing the joke. Where you cry without earning it. Where you want something without checking if you should want it. Where you do something unexplainable and it feels right. Where you're water again, even just for a minute. And in those moments, you'll remember, this is worth it. This is why I'm doing this. Because I'd rather be alone and alive than surrounded and suffocating. So let me bring this home. Let me tell you what this whole thing has been about. You clicked on this video because you don't feel like yourself anymore. And now you know why. Not because you're broken, not because you lost something, but because you froze. You spent years, maybe decades, building a personality that works. A personality that gets promoted and invited and loved. A personality that makes sense to everyone else. And somewhere in that process, you forgot that working and living aren't the same thing. You forgot that you're not a rock. You're a river. Henri Bergson tried to warn us. 100 years ago, he looked at the modern world and said, "You're killing yourselves. You're treating time like space, consciousness like machinery, selves like products. You're living in spatial time, in clock time, in measured time, and you're forgetting how to live in duration, in flow, in the continuous, unpredictable, unmeasurable experience of being alive." He said we have two selves. The superficial self, the one that's consistent and explainable and functional. And the deep self, the one that flows and changes and contradicts itself. And modern life is designed to reward the superficial self and starve the deep self, to keep us frozen, to keep us predictable, to keep us from flooding. And he said the only way out is intuition. Not mystical intuition, not gut feelings or crystal balls, but intuition as a practice. The practice of knowing things from the inside instead of from the outside. The practice of being instead of analyzing. The practice of flowing instead of freezing. And that's what this video has been. That's what these practices are. They're intuition training. They're teaching you how to melt, how to create gaps in your schedule where the deep self can breathe, how to hear the impulses you've been ignoring, how to tell the truth about not being fine, how to touch the child self you abandoned, how to stop explaining yourself, how to let a whole day unfold without control. These aren't self-care tips. These aren't optimization hacks. These are insurgency tactics. These are acts of rebellion against the dictatorship of your superficial self, against the tyranny of consistency, against the lie that you're supposed to be a finished product instead of an ongoing process. And yes, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you relationships. It's going to cost you predictability. It's going to cost you the comfort of knowing exactly who you are and what you want at all times. But here's what you get. You get to stop being a hostage in your own life. You get to stop performing stability and start living it. You get to be water again. And water is free. Water moves. Water changes shape based on what life brings it. Water doesn't apologize. Water doesn't freeze unless something external makes it freeze. And when that external force goes away, water flows again, immediately, naturally. Because that's what water does. So here's what I want you to take with you. Not as advice, not as a goal, but as permission. As a reminder of what you actually are underneath all the ice. You are not a project. You are a process. You are not a brand. You are a river. You don't need to find yourself. You need to let yourself flow. You don't need to figure out who you are. You need to stop trying to be who you were. You don't need a personality. You need fluidity. And yes, it's messy. Yes, it's unpredictable. Yes, some people won't understand. But here's what they won't tell you. The mess is the point. The unpredictability is the point. The not understanding is the point. Because life isn't supposed to be clean. Rivers aren't supposed to be predictable. Water isn't supposed to stay in one shape forever. You didn't lose your personality. You froze it. Because the world needed you to stop flooding. Because people needed you to be manageable. Because you needed to survive. And freezing worked. It got you here. It got you through. But now you're here. Now you've survived. And the question is, are you going to keep living as ice? Or are you going to remember that ice is just water that's afraid? So here's your permission. Thaw. Make one unexplained choice. Take one chaos day. Tell one truth about not being fine. Follow one impulse without justification. Create one gap in your schedule where nothing is planned. Do one thing your 12-year-old self would recognize. That's it. That's the crack in the dam. That's where the water starts moving. And once it starts moving, you won't be able to stop it. You won't want to. Because you'll remember what it feels like to be alive instead of functional. What it feels like to flow instead of freeze. What it feels like to be water instead of ice. And some people will leave. And some people will stay. And new people will come. Water people. Flow people. People who don't need you to be predictable to love you. People who get more excited when you're honest than when you're appropriate. People who would rather have your mess than your performance. And you'll build a new life. Not a better life, necessarily. Not a perfect life, but a flowing life. A life where you're allowed to change. Where you're allowed to contradict yourself. Where you're allowed to want something today that you didn't want yesterday without calling it instability. And that life, that flowing life, it won't look like what you planned. It won't fit the image you've been maintaining. It won't make sense to everyone who knew the frozen you, but it will feel like yours. Actually, yours. Not the you that works. Not the you that's promotable. Not the you that's lovable, but the you that's alive. So if this landed, if something in you just exhaled for the first time in years, if you felt a flicker of recognition when I talked about the river and the desert and the voice saying you were always water, do me a favor, leave a comment. Not about the video, not about whether you agreed or disagreed or found it helpful. Leave a comment about you. Tell me, what's one thing you used to do that made no sense but made you feel alive? And when did you stop? And why? Because here's the secret they don't tell you about this work. It doesn't happen alone. The deep self doesn't thrive in isolation. It needs witnesses. It needs people who see you unfreezing and say, yeah, me too. It needs a community of water people who are all learning to flow again after years of being ice. So comment. Share this if it meant something. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of thing. More philosophy that's not academic but lived. More psychology that's not clinical but human. But honestly, the most important thing you can do right now is close this tab. Stop watching videos about aliveness and go be alive. Go do something unexplainable. Something your superficial self would never approve. Something that makes you feel like you again, even if you can't articulate who that is yet. Something that cracks the ice. The river's still there, under all that freeze. Under all those years of performance and optimization and self-abandonment. The river's still there. It's just been waiting. Waiting for you to stop holding it back. Waiting for you to remember that you were never supposed to be a rock. You were always supposed to flow, so go. Flow, thaw, break the ice, make the mess, be unpredictable, tell the truth, follow the impulse, trust the deep self. Let yourself change. Let yourself contradict. Let yourself be water. You're not broken. You've just been frozen. And ice melts. It just needs heat. And the heat is this: one choice. One spontaneous, unexplained, unoptimized choice. One moment where you choose flow over freeze. Aliveness over performance. Water over ice. That's all. That's the beginning. That's the crack. The rest will happen on its own. Because water wants to flow. Your deep self wants to live. It's just been trapped for so long, it forgot how. But it remembers. It's remembering right now. You're remembering right now. So go, be water. The river's waiting. You've been waiting. It's time.